Some mornings I wonder how I even get out of bed. It's 5 a.m., and the house is still heavy with sleep, except for me, already moving. I'm the one who rolls out of bed, packs lunches with tired hands, checks homework at the kitchen table under flickering light, and then races to the hospital for a 12-hour shift. The kind of shift where every beep and cry feels like a personal battle, even when all I want is to collapse into my own bed. Last night was no different. My youngest woke from a nightmare, her small hands clutching at my sleeve. I held her close, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Somewhere deep inside, a fire burns. Not for me, but for those two little faces depending on me. My sacrifices go unseen, unpraised. No one asks how I manage the chaos or where I find the strength to keep moving. Jeffrey, their father, is supposed to be part of this picture, but lately, I'm not sure if he's even trying. The man who should be their rock is more like a shadow, distant, unreliable, fading. What keeps me going is my secret weapon: meticulous notes, a ledger of every missed payment, every court date skipped, every legal loophole he tries to exploit. I'm building my case quietly, like a warrior sharpening her sword in the dark. This battle isn't just about money, it's about justice, about shielding my children from a father who chooses selfishness over responsibility. I'm exhausted beyond words, but I am nothing if not resolute. I still remember the day Jeffrey walked out, though it wasn't the first time he'd vanished in spirit. It wasn't sudden. The late nights, the empty promises, the excuses all piled up long before the papers were signed. After our youngest was born, the real cracks showed. Jeffrey stopped sending any child support. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Maybe he was genuinely struggling. I worked overtime shifts, covered rent, bought school supplies, and hoped he'd come around for our children's sake. But weeks turned to months, months to years, and the silence from him grew louder. I reached out more times than I can count. Texts, calls, even a few desperate visits, only to be met with excuses or worse, nothing at all. I watched him online, flaunting dinners at expensive restaurants and vacations while I counted every penny in the dim light of a single lamp. The unfairness settled into my bones. I was left carrying the weight alone while he lived a double life. It wasn't neglect. It was calculated abandonment. It hurts to admit it, but that truth fuels me. The battle isn't just about money or custody. It's about fighting for the children who deserve better than a father who disappears when it's inconvenient. I've given everything to keep my children's lives stable. 2 jobs, thousands of dollars out of my own pocket, endless nights spent agonizing over bills. Rent alone is $200 a month. On top of that, extracurricular activities and healthcare cost another $500 monthly. I've fronted every expense for 47 months while Jeffrey's debt piles up to more than $56,000. The children's school counselor, Mrs. Turner, often tells me they're lucky to have someone like me. But at home, even my sister Laura questions my choices sometimes, thinking maybe I'm too hard on myself or too stubborn to let go. Daniel Brooks, my best friend, keeps me grounded. You're fighting for more than money, he tells me. You're fighting for their future. He's right. I've become more than a mother. I'm a strategist. With every legal notice, every court date, I bring evidence. Screenshots of Jeffrey's luxury cars, posts of nights out, vacations he claims he can't afford. My ledger is exhaustive, detailed, proof that he's living a lie. Every entry is a weapon in this fight. I'm methodical because I have to be. This is war, and I'm the only soldier standing between my children and a father who won't step up. The first time Jeffrey flaunted his contempt in public, it broke something inside me. It was during a custody exchange at the community center. He arrived in a sleek BMW, smirking, surrounded by friends who laughed loudly as if enjoying a private joke. People whispered as I stood there, worn out, trying to keep my composure. Jeffrey's voice cut through the air, loud enough for strangers to hear. "I'm barely scraping by, and you want more money?" His friends erupted in laughter. The children, caught in the middle, looked confused and uneasy. My youngest clung to me, sensing my frustration. Jeffrey mocked me openly, calling me overbearing, making a spectacle out of my fight to keep our family afloat. Afterward, I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, the sting of humiliation burning fresh. Doubts crept in like unwelcome shadows. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was asking too much. But when I looked at my children's sleeping faces, I pushed the doubts aside. This wasn't about pride or embarrassment. It was about them, their safety, their future. I refused to break. Instead, I gathered my strength, reminding myself that this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, and I would meet cruelty with quiet endurance, one day at a time. The moment I dared to push back, Jeffrey launched his counterattack with the precision of a viper striking its prey. Whispers traveled through our shared circles like wildfire, painting me as the villain, the bitter ex who wouldn't let him live in peace. It stung, more than I wanted to admit. His new wife, a shadowy figure I hardly knew, joined the chorus from behind her screen, calling me unstable in carefully crafted posts. I felt the sting of those words as if they pierced through the armor I'd spent so long building. But the worst came from his family. My own flesh and blood turned against me. They blamed me for the divorce and accused me of alienating the children, as if I were the one tearing our family apart rather than the man who walked away. When I reached out to Laura, looking for even a flicker of understanding, her voice was cool, her doubts barely hidden. It was a cold shoulder wrapped in concern, a reminder that standing alone meant feeling every cut more sharply. Daniel was the only voice of reason amidst the storm. "They're trying to break you down," he said, voice low but firm. "But they won't win. Not if you don't let them." I clung to that, even as the isolation crept in like a cold fog around my heart. I was cornered, yes, but not defeated. If anything, this only sharpened my resolve. Trying to find a way out of the spiraling chaos, I agreed to mediation, hoping for a chance to settle things with reason rather than more battles. The room was sterile, the air thick with tension as I laid out my case, the ledger tracking every missed payment, screenshots of Jeffrey's lavish lifestyle, receipts for every dollar spent on the kids. My voice trembled only once when I described what the children had endured with their father's absence. Jeffrey, ever the actor, wore the mask of a struggling man, his voice soft and pleading. "I'm struggling, Your Honor," he said, eyes welling with fake remorse. The mediator, caught between neutrality and pragmatism, suggested a reduced payment plan and shared custody, ignoring the evidence I'd spent months compiling. Jeffrey twisted the narrative, painting himself as the victim of my unreasonable demands. I left that room feeling hollow, the fairness of the system slipping through my fingers like sand. Daniel met me outside, his expression a mix of frustration and hope. "You went in with facts," he said quietly, "and sometimes that's enough to plant seeds. The truth is there. It just takes time." But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the bitter taste of defeat or the gnawing fear that the fight would only get harder. The humiliation hit hard the day Jeffrey's wedding rolled around. The invitation never came to me, though the children were expected at the ceremony, dressed in stiff formal clothes that made them fidget with discomfort. I watched from a distance, the ache in my chest growing with every step they took inside without me. The house was filled with laughter and music, but for me, it was a cold reminder of the line I wasn't allowed to cross. During the reception, the children's confusion and stress boiled over, sullen faces, restless movements, and Jeffrey's family was quick to pin the blame on me. One cousin, loud and cruel, called me a vindictive mother in front of guests, as if my presence or absence had conjured my children's distress. Later, the school called. Their teacher's voice was gentle but concerned, sharing news of sudden drops in grades and emotional withdrawal. I held the phone tight, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. The divide was clear. Me on the outside, labeled the antagonist in my own children's lives, while Jeffrey and his family played the part of the caring, stable unit. It was a public and private humiliation layered with consequences I couldn't ignore. The sting of being excluded, the whispers behind my back, and the school's worry all pushed me deeper into despair. Still, beneath the pain, a fierce determination burned. If this was the cost of standing up for my children, I was ready to pay. In a last-ditch effort, I poured everything into a letter I sent Jeffrey, hoping to reach the father I once knew. the man I needed to be a partner in this fight for our children. I wrote with raw honesty. I'm asking for what's fair, not for me, but for our kids. They need stability, and they deserve better. I asked for a meeting, a chance to discuss co-parenting without the bitterness that clouded every interaction. Days stretched into silence. No reply. Then, finally, a curt message arrived, dismissing my concerns and refusing any meeting or payments. He ghosted me completely. The finality of his rejection crashed over me like a wave. Daniel stood by me, steady as ever, his voice firm when he said, "You gave him every chance. Now it's time to protect what's yours." The line had been crossed, unmistakably. There would be no cooperation, no shared understanding. I felt the weight of the fight press down harder than ever before. But somewhere in that crushing silence, a new resolve took root. I was exhausted, yes, but I was far from broken. This battle was no longer just a struggle. It was war, and I was ready to fight like a mother possessed. The chill of rejection settled deep into my bones, heavier than the exhaustion from endless nights and early mornings. My family's distance wasn't just physical. It was a cold, silent judgment that wrapped around me like a noose. Laura's voice haunted me, her words sharp and hesitant. "You're burning bridges, Rebecca. Maybe it's time to think about what you're losing." I wanted to scream that this wasn't a choice. It was survival. But even her doubts felt like cracks in the foundation I'd spent years building. At work, the fatigue gnawed relentlessly. The hospital's fluorescent lights blurred with my mounting stress. The beeping monitors and urgent calls felt like echoes of my own unraveling. I caught myself zoning out during patient rounds, my mind tangled in spreadsheets of unpaid bills and court motions delayed again. Somewhere, justice had become a ghost. At home, the children's smiles flickered less, their laughter quieter, weighed down by the tension they sensed but couldn't name. My youngest clung tighter, eyes wide and searching for reassurance I struggled to give. "Am I failing them?" I whispered into the dark, the question a relentless echo that threatened to drown me. Daniel's calls were lifelines, but even his steady words couldn't fully pierce the fog of isolation. Money was a constant looming shadow. $56,400 in debt that wasn't just numbers but months of missed chances for my children. Legal paperwork cluttered every surface, a chaotic reminder of a system that moved too slow, too indifferent to the desperation in my heart. Alone, vulnerable, and exhausted, I stood on the edge of surrender. But surrender wasn't an option. Not yet. The courtroom buzzed with a tension so thick it felt suffocating. Jeffrey strolled in, slick and sharp in his tailored suit, that same smug confidence plastered across his face like armor. His voice was calm, rehearsed as he pleaded poverty, spinning tales of hardship that clashed violently with the images I carried in my pocket. Screenshots of his lavish dinners, nights out, that gleaming BMW parked just outside, mocking my struggle. When Judge Moore's gaze flicked toward the window, locking eyes with the car's personalized plate, the room fell silent. "Is that your vehicle, Mr. Robinson?" Her voice was low but cutting, a blade slicing through his facade. Jeffrey's smirk evaporated. Color drained from his face as gasps rippled through the gallery. The weight of his lies crushed the false narrative he'd spun for so long. The judge's orders came swift and unyielding. Contempt of court for willful non-payment. A full custody review citing neglect. I sat frozen, heart pounding, watching the mask crumble. In that moment, years of pain and sacrifice sharpened into something fierce and clear. No more excuses, no more lies. The cold clarity of justice sparked inside me, igniting a fire that burned away doubt and fear. The courtroom, once a place of humiliation, transformed into a battleground where I reclaimed my strength. My breath deepened, my eyes burned with determination. This fight was far from over, but now I was ready to become the warrior my children needed. Back in the quiet sanctuary of my apartment, the courtroom's echoes haunted every corner. I sank onto the couch, the weight of betrayal pressing down harder than ever before. 47 months. 47 months of broken promises, of empty wallets and stolen futures. The humiliation of watching Jeffrey parade his lies in public replayed relentlessly in my mind. Yet beneath the anger simmered a deeper pain, the silent suffering of my children, their unspoken confusion and fractured trust. I remembered the nights I stayed awake, counting every penny, the days I juggled shifts and school runs, the tears I hid behind a brave face. The pattern was painfully clear. Manipulation was never about me. It was about control, about keeping me silent, isolated, broken. He never cared about the kids. I whispered into the empty room, the realization cutting sharper than any insult. But from that pain, a fierce resolve surged. No more silence, no more excuses. This ends now, I vowed, the words solidifying into armor around my heart. The despair that once threatened to swallow me transformed into a weapon, a raw, unyielding power born from years of sacrifice and heartbreak. I began to map out the path ahead in my mind, the first steps toward reclaiming not just what was owed, but what was rightfully mine. The awakening was brutal, but necessary. I was no longer just surviving, I was preparing to fight back. That evening, the phone felt heavier than usual in my hand as I dialed Daniel's number. "It's time," I said, voice steady, but charged with the weight of my decision. "I'm done waiting for justice to come to me." His silence on the other end was brief, replaced by a calm, measured response. We talked strategy, gathering every piece of evidence from missed payments to social media proof, building a case that couldn't be ignored. Daniel's voice was steady, offering practical steps. "We'll document everything. Payments, missed visits, posts. We'll find a lawyer who understands parental alienation." The words sparked a flicker of hope in me, a light in the suffocating dark. I laid out my goal plainly. I want them safe, stable, and away from his influence. His agreement was immediate, resolute, and we'll make sure the court sees the truth clearly. That conversation shifted something inside me. From defensive exhaustion to proactive determination, I began drafting emails, organizing files, setting meetings with legal experts. My posture straightened, my mind sharpened into a weapon of focus. No longer just a victim, I was a strategist, ready to fight harder, smarter, with every piece of truth on my side. This was no longer a battle of survival. It was a war I intended to win, and I was ready to lead. The nights spent poring over Jeffrey's patterns with Daniel revealed cracks I hadn't dared to look at before. It wasn't just the missed payments or his inflated claims of hardship. He leaned on me in ways that cloaked neglect in illusion. During his visitation times, I learned, Jeffrey relied on me to fill the gaps he refused to acknowledge. Last-minute calls for childcare when he vanished into his social whirl, promises to show up that dissolved into silence. We gathered witness statements from neighbors who had seen Jeffrey stumbling out of parties, leaving the kids unattended or visibly distressed. The image he painted in court, of a struggling father doing his best, was unraveling thread by thread. Daniel's investigator confirmed what I suspected but had no proof of before. Jeffrey's BMW, that symbol of his hard times, was registered under a shell company he conveniently never mentioned in court. Instagram told its own story. Lavish dinners, exotic vacations, new gadgets, while his legal filings claimed empty pockets. The disparity was staggering. Every screenshot, every witness testimony, stacked like bricks in a wall I was building to protect my children. The family court consultant we met with drilled into me how to frame these facts: parental alienation, neglect, financial deception. I saw it clearly. The power wasn't just in the evidence, but in assembling it with precision, dismantling his carefully constructed lie piece by piece. Mapping Jeffrey's vulnerabilities gave me a strange kind of strength. For so long, I'd felt overwhelmed, like a single mother caught in a storm without shelter. But now, I saw the shape of the battlefield. He depended on my goodwill to cover his failures, on the system's blind spots, on the silence of those around him. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was strategizing for victory. The weight of the fight settled on my shoulders, but it no longer crushed me. Instead, it sharpened my resolve. I was ready to expose the truth, no matter how deep the wound it would cause. This was my war, and I was no longer just a mother bearing the burden. I was the commander of my children's future. Despite the turmoil raging beneath the surface, I forced myself to maintain a calm exterior. At work, I smiled through exhaustion, answered patients with practiced compassion, and hid the storm in my eyes. At home, I was the anchor my children clung to, shielding them from the chaos I knew was coming. Daniel and I encrypted every file, stored witness statements safely, and rehearsed my testimony in low, quiet voices over coffee. I consulted a child psychologist, careful to document the emotional scars my kids carried, knowing this would be critical in court. Every interaction was deliberate, every word measured. My social media went dark. No posts, no hints that anything was amiss. Jeffrey's world thrived on appearances. I refused to give him even a crack to exploit. Behind that quiet facade, I began to track Jeffrey's new wife's public posts, sensing a flicker of something beneath the surface, an ally waiting to be found. The tension was a tight wire stretched taut between us, and I walked it silently, preparing for the showdown I knew was inevitable. My legal file grew thicker, a fortress built on meticulous detail, dates, receipts, messages, photos, but my secret weapon was the strategy itself, the plan to dismantle Jeffrey's narrative, to expose his lies and neglect fully. I was no longer just documenting, I was orchestrating. The storm was coming, but I was ready. For the first time in months, I felt the cold calm of control settle over me. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about winning. Then, out of nowhere, a message slid into my inbox that changed everything. Emily, Jeffrey's new wife. Her words trembled with fear and desperation. "I can't live like this anymore. I want to help you expose him, for the kids' sake, and for my own." The shock was immediate. I'd imagined isolation, battles fought in silence, but never an ally from inside his world. We arranged a meeting, careful and quiet. Emily came with evidence that shattered the fragile mask Jeffrey wore. Photos of bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, texts where he threatened her silence like a weapon, admissions of neglect toward the children during his supposed care. The truth was darker and more immediate than I had feared. This was no longer a battle of finances and missed payments. It was about exposing a man whose control involved fear and abuse, whose neglect put innocent lives at risk. Suddenly, I was not alone. Emily's courage lit a fire inside me, but it also raised the stakes. Danger lurked closer now. But so did the chance for justice in its rawest form. Holding these new pieces of truth, I felt the battle grow larger, more urgent. The war I thought I was prepared for was only the beginning. Time was slipping, and with Emily's help, I was ready to strike. The weight on my chest shifted from exhaustion to fierce, burning purpose. This was the moment the fight turned lethal. The first moves had to be calculated and swift. With the new evidence in hand, my lawyer filed an emergency motion, citing immediate risk to the children and abuse. Formal notices demanding back payments arrived at Jeffrey's door, each letter a hammer blow to his charade. I blocked every channel he tried to use to manipulate me. Calls, texts, social media, cutting off his access like severing a poisonous vine. Emily agreed to testify, but under anonymity to protect her from retaliation. The pressure mounted quietly, invisibly tightening around Jeffrey's world. He was blindsided. The first cracks showed quickly. Missed business meetings, social events avoided, a growing restlessness in his public persona. I watched his social media like a hawk, ready to catch any lie, any slip. Rumors began to swirl. His credit rating took hits from court fines, and business partners started to distance themselves as whispers of scandal grew louder. These early strikes unsettled him, but he remained unaware that they were just the opening salvo. The full force of my plan was still behind the curtain, waiting to unfold. I stood firm, a warrior in the quiet, knowing this first phase was only the beginning of a battle that would define my children's future. The war had started, and I was ready to fight with everything I had. The courtroom was packed beyond anything I had dared hope for, rows filled with strangers, a few sympathetic faces, and the sharp eyes of Judge Moore, who seemed ready to unravel every lie Jeffrey had spun. My hands trembled as I laid out the evidence, each document a weapon, payment records that mapped every missed month, screenshots of Jeffrey's indulgent nights out, and the expert's report on parental alienation that cut through his manipulations like a scalpel. Emily's testimony, carefully anonymized, was read aloud by my lawyer, her voice trembling but undeniable, a damning picture of neglect hidden beneath Jeffrey's glossy veneer. Jeffrey sat across from me, his usual smug confidence drained, replaced by a flicker of panic I hadn't seen before. When the judge directly challenged him about the discrepancies, his answers faltered. He stammered, shifted in his seat, even tried to deflect blame, but the wall of evidence was impenetrable. "Your Honor," I said, voice steady but fierce, "my children deserve a safe environment, not just financial support. They deserve a father who shows up, not just in court, but in their lives." The room held its breath as witnesses corroborated my claims. Teachers who noted the children's anxiety, neighbors who saw Jeffrey's indifference, and the psychologist's report detailing the emotional toll. The judge's expression hardened as she acknowledged the pattern of neglect and danger. Jeffrey's fingers clenched into fists. His usual smirk vanished. When the judge announced a temporary suspension of his visitation rights and scheduled a full custody review, I felt the shift in the room, like the air itself had changed. This was my moment, my calculated revenge unfolding perfectly. I caught my children's eyes, Emily's bright, trusting gaze and Josh's quiet strength, and felt a fierce surge of pride. The fight wasn't over, but the battle had turned. I was no longer the weary victim. I was their protector, their warrior, and this victory was ours. Jeffrey's world began to unravel almost immediately. Calls from business associates asking pointed questions flooded his phone. Whispers of scandal spread like wildfire. His social media accounts, once a stage for flaunted luxury, now drew skeptical comments and snide remarks. Desperate messages flooded my inbox. Pleas for a truce, promises of change, veiled threats wrapped in honeyed words. But I held firm, unmoved. His family tried a different tactic. Love bombing. Calls, visits, texts filled with false warmth, aimed to wear me down. But I maintained my boundaries, steeling myself for the long haul. The judge's ruling became public, a headline that shattered his carefully curated image. The anonymous testimony from Emily cast a long shadow, exposing the darkness behind closed doors, and even Laura, my sister, began to see me not as a cautionary tale, but as a force of nature. The children's school reports improved. No longer weighed down by fear, they began to thrive. The small moments, Josh's laughter during recess, Emily's eager hand raised in class, reminded me why I fought so hard. There was cautious optimism blooming inside me, fragile, but real. The legal system, slow and frustrating, was finally bending toward justice, and for once, I dared to hope. But Jeffrey refused to give up. He escalated, desperate to regain control. He hired a private investigator to dig into my past, searching for anything to discredit me. His relatives, his flying monkeys, launched waves of harassment, anonymous threats, texts meant to intimidate, and subtle warnings left on my doorstep. Even his new wife's family joined the assault, their cruelty sharpened by years of silence. Jeffrey threatened legal appeals, false allegations, and endless litigation meant to drain my energy and break my resolve. But I was ready. Every incident was documented, every message saved and reported to authorities. Daniel and my lawyer became my shield, coordinating responses and strengthening my defenses. I fortified our home, installing security cameras and changing school pickup routines to keep the children safe. Every attempt to isolate me only pushed Jeffrey further into disgrace. Courts began warning him about sanctions, condemning his abusive tactics. His credibility collapsed like a house of cards. My resilience grew stronger with every assault. I was exhausted, yes, but unshaken, unyielding. For my children, I was a fortress. The more he tried to destroy me, the clearer it became that his empire was built on sand, and I was the storm that would wash it all away. Months later, standing outside the family court with my children by my side, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The judge's final ruling was a triumph. Full custody awarded to me. Child support garnished directly from Jeffrey's accounts. The court emphasized what I had fought for all along: the children's best interests, their safety, and the stability I provided day in, day out. Daniel stood quietly nearby, his steady presence a new anchor in my life, and even Laura's proud smile was no longer tinged with doubt. The kids were thriving, enrolled in counseling, excelling at school, free from the weight of fear that had once tethered them. Jeffrey's fate remained uncertain. Estranged from his children, his reputation in ruins, left to face the consequences of his own choices. As I prepared dinner that evening, the kitchen filled with the sound of my children's laughter, a simple yet profound reminder of why I fought so fiercely. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming our future, building a life where they could grow without fear or neglect. I felt peace not from victory alone, but from knowing I had stood tall, a warrior mother who refused to break. The custody checkmate was complete, opening a new chapter of resilience, love, and hard-earned freedom.